My entitled Karen friend refuses to take me to the hospital right after my water broke, saying that we could just have the baby at her house instead. Here's what happened. This happened a few decades ago. So I had been somewhere with my friends, and afterward they invited me to visit their home for a while in the evening. We stopped by a corner store for snacks, and while perusing some of the goodies, it felt like I suddenly had peed myself. I was full term and my water had broken inside the store. It wasn't anything extreme, but it was a pretty good sign that my baby would be here quite soon. So I told my friends with whom I was riding, and then we went to her house. At first I thought it was to drop her kids off with her husband, and then she would take me to the hospital. But when we arrived, we went inside and I told her, okay, now I gotta get to the hospital. I knew this because I had already been there a few days before for a false labor, and the doctor literally told me that it will be any day now. But my friend's response absolutely blew my mind. She said, no, you can have the baby here. She was just cool as a cucumber saying this as well. Since I was getting into a more advanced phase of labor pretty quickly, I couldn't remain standing. So she got some towels for me to sit on so I wouldn't get her sofa wet while sitting on it. She was seriously going to try to force me to have my baby at her house. I told her again, no, you don't understand. I need to get to the hospital. But she wouldn't budge. Well, I wasn't willing to do this at her house with her husband and her kids there. I had a doctor and a hospital all arranged, and the last possible second, she decides to try and hold me hostage and force me to have my baby at her house. I said I needed to use the phone. There were no cell phones back then when this happened, so I used her house phone and called my mom and covered the phone with my mouth and my hand and spoke very quietly, whispering directly into the phone. I said I'm at my friend's house, my water just broke, and she is refusing to take me to the hospital. My mom replied quickly and said, I'll be right there. She didn't live far away, so in a few minutes there was a knock at the door. They answered and my mom said, I'm here to get my daughter. She brought one of the neighbors to help her out. They burst into the door after saying that, and one on each side, they grabbed me and carried me to the car. The labor was so advanced I could barely stand anymore. They were racing to the hospital and got me there just in time to get me prepped and call my doctor. The doctor made it on very short notice, and in a few minutes my new baby was here. But what my friend did was infuriating to me. It just sucked the joy out of my entire experience. After that, I knew she could not be trusted. I did not go to a doctor and make arrangements to have a safe birth and protect my baby in case there was any last-minute problems, just to have someone try and hijack my baby's birth and force me to do what she decided just because I was stuck with her at that time. And she made no efforts at her house to get anything ready. I guess she thought that this was just gonna happen on her dirty floors. I mean, honestly, who does that? Who hijacks someone else's labor, basically holds them hostage, and forces them to forego the sanitary hospital where any birth emergencies can be dealt with by an experienced physician and hospital staff, and all the benefits of advanced medical care one has access to in a hospital. And worst of all, after this happened, this lady never apologized. Thankfully, I moved pretty soon after that, and I haven't seen them in several years. How crazy do you have to be to try and force someone to have birth at your own house? First off, who would want that? That sounds like a miserable experience for everybody around. There's about to be a small human on your floor. You really want to deal with that? I'd rather have a doctor deal with that. I wouldn't know the first thing of how to handle that. Crazy stuff all around, and good for this original poster for cutting this person out of their life, because this person is very clearly not your friend, and she does not have your best interests in mind in the slightest. My wife just told me that she's in love with another man, and I honestly don't know what to do. 4 years ago, I had a roommate, and we partied a lot. I made my fair share of mistakes, and so did my girlfriend at the time. We both cheated on each other, but not in a physical way, but we both categorized it as cheating, and it was her with my roommate. In October of 2018, my girlfriend and I got married. 4 years later, I've got a 2-year-old son, and my relationship with my wife has been good. It has been rocky at times, but we've always stayed connected at a good level. There were about 3 to 4 times early on in our marriage when she was struggling with my cheating on her and messaged my ex-roommate to get back at me. I don't know what their conversation said, but she said it was mostly venting, and then she would send him a message saying, I miss you, and then she would block him. She would admit to me after each time she would message him, and was always an emotional mess. We finally got to a point that he was blocked on everything, and she hasn't been in communication with him for over a year. Fast forward to a month ago, my wife was acting really weird for a few days and would not touch me or talk to me. She then admitted she's been having really weird dreams about my ex-roommate that she cheated on me with. She told me that it wasn't anything physical, if you know what I mean, but it was like he almost was trying to tell her something. At this point, I was really distraught by what she said, even though it was just a dream, and told her that I needed needed her to keep those things to herself in the future unless she felt like it was affecting our relationship and connection. Mostly because he has become a pretty big trigger for me and kickstarts a lot of anxiety. Well, fast forward to 3 days ago, and my wife has been extremely distant and doesn't want to spend any time with me, and has been going on long drives by herself while I stay home in the evenings. She comes home one night and finally tells me that she not only still has feelings for my ex-roommate that she cheated on me with, but that she is in love with him. She says that she hasn't had any communication with him, but she had a conversation with a mutual friend about a month ago, and the mutual friend told her that my ex-roommate is head over heels for my wife and would marry her tomorrow if he could. She also tells me that she trusts this guy more than anyone in the world, including me, and she doesn't think she would ever be able to stop caring and checking up on him all the time. At this point, I'm devastated. I can't help but think that my marriage is almost over, despite the fact that she tells me she would never leave me for him, even though she has these feelings. I got on her computer the other night while she was gone and found that she's been stalking all of his social media almost daily for the past month and has been listening to all the songs he dedicated to her, as well as listening to playlists labeled as Forbidden Love. She told me that it's not even a competition and she would never consider leaving me, but it's very hard to believe her considering how distant she has been and how much it has affected our relationship. I talked to her again last night and she told me that she thinks we both need to go to therapy to work on this, and that she thinks the only way to have closure with this guy is to meet up with him and talk, which is what she thinks the therapist will tell her as well. I told her that I would consider our relationship over if she were to meet up or talk with this guy in any way, shape, or form. I did tell her, however, that I may be willing to compromise if a therapist told her that talking to him was the only way to resolve this issue. I can't help but feeling like talking to this guy is going to just open up the door further and I'll be completely losing her. I love my wife and would literally do anything for her, but I don't trust her at all right now and it's absolutely destroying me inside. What should I do? Your wife is doing something that's incredibly toxic. She's going after a guy she hasn't even talked to in years, and quite literally, she is in love with a fantasy. She is head over heels for some guy she hasn't talked to in a long time. Like, this guy could be a complete creep at this point in his life. She literally does not know him, and all the red flags are there for this original poster. She's basically saying that she would rather be with this guy than with him, and this is all in spite of their child that they have together. This lady is willing to throw away her marriage just to get with some roommate that she cheated on you with. I mean, in my opinion, this does not sound like a good situation. If I were in your shoes, I would be securing a lawyer like yesterday. There is no way I would move forward without somebody to have my back, especially if my wife is talking about leaving me. This really is a terrible situation, but if you think therapy might help this situation, I think you can go ahead and do it. But to be completely honest, this does not look promising, and I would just be ready to protect yourself as well as your child in case your wife decides to leave you. My friend is extremely toxic and very manipulative, and I don't know how to handle them or what to do in this situation. The title says it all. I'm struggling to maintain a relationship with one of my longtime friends due to how toxic and manipulative they act. So for a bit of context, I have been friends with her since I was around 16 years old. We met while we were in high school, and we have formed a very close friendship since then. I would probably call her my closest and best friend. Recently, her behavior has become more and more toxic and manipulative. I could write a huge post about all the instances I could recall, but I will give some short examples to keep it brief. She has told multiple lies about me as well as our other mutual friends to many other people, and most of the times these allegations involve serious stuff. She also likes painting herself as if she has done nothing wrong, which is just honestly not the case. She often tries to gaslight me whenever we argue and invalidate my feelings, making it seem as if I'm causing an issue when I'm just trying to express my feelings about how she has treated me. She can be quite unreliable, making plans and then canceling last minute at the expense of everyone else around her. I could go on further about her behavior, but I'll get down to my main point. Our mutual friend group and myself have begun to discuss her behavior and share our experiences of it with one another. After doing so, we are at a loss on how to deal with her. Some people want to organize an intervention for her as a last resort, and others want to just cut her off entirely. I understand that most people will read this and come to the conclusion that cutting her off is the healthiest choice. However, I want to try my best to rectify this situation and see if she can resolve her issues and behavior. She is a very good friend of mine, and I know that she is capable of being better. Does anyone have any similar experiences or helpful advice that they could share? If an intervention is a good idea, how should we go about organizing one. What should I do? I've got to be honest, when someone starts making up lies that include serious accusations and then goes around gaslighting people and trying to invalidate how you feel, as well as causing issues and all these other problems, this is not someone that I would then consider a friend. And you know what? I don't think you need an intervention to cut this person out of your life. If I was a friend in this friend group, I would have cut her off a long time ago and said, guys, if you keep hanging out with her, I'm not going to stick around. I do not need to have that kind of energy in my life, and I refuse to let anybody talk to me like that. I don't care who they are, especially when there's repeated behavior like this that only proves that they are not willing to change. And that is honestly not my fault. I think if you really did want to have some kind of intervention, you certainly could, but I can only see this making things worse, because this doesn't sound like this is someone who wants to change. And sure, if you're not comfortable with just completely cutting her off all of a sudden, then you can take the slow approach and slowly but surely gradually distance yourself away from this person, while also trying to find some kind of healthy relationship with others where you can genuinely say they're your friend and they're not going to be abusive towards you, which is exactly what this person has been to you. So hopefully this goes well, because at the end of the day, you can't force somebody to change, especially if they are not willing to change themselves. My family acts as if I'm committing a crime for not marrying someone with a good profession so I can stay home and never work. And at this point, I just don't know how to deal with this. I come from a culture which believes that only stupid people marry for love. This brainwashing has come back up when a family member of mine kept flaunting her wealth. As a side note, she did not earn any of this money, but she married someone who did earn all that money, and she tries to pass it off as her hard work. I felt stupid at dinner yesterday because one of my parents pointed out that this relative of ours will never have to face the same issues I will. And while I disagree logically, emotionally it stung for some reason. They also put so many doubts in my head while comparing me to my relative, saying stuff like, wouldn't you want a life where you can just focus on your well-being? Now, I'm not a career-driven person. I don't mind my job, and I work so we can pay rent and reach our goals. But my family thinks that this isn't the way it should be, and that he already has his wealth set up, and that I should just go enjoy it. But in reality, me and my significant other are both young and figuring out life and have a vision of how we want our married life to be, as well as the plans of what we're going to be working towards. Me and my parents keep having fights because I tell them I wasn't thinking in this way when I met my significant other. I just clicked with him and we went from there. But they keep convincing me I'm making a big mistake and should somehow change course. I just feel so confused and deflated. I really don't care that my significant other is not a doctor, an architect, or a lawyer. These are the professions my family only sees as valid. He has a job and is hardworking, even starting a side business, so he's not some deadbeat. And only if I get to stay home will they see this as a good marriage. I feel like love has nothing to do with how convenient someone is able to make your life. But they don't believe me. I don't want to lose them, but I also don't want my relationship to be ruined due to the thoughts they're putting in my head. I really love my boyfriend, and I don't want my family's toxic conditioning to mess it up, nor do I want to end up not talking to them. My boyfriend and I live in our own apartment, and no, he doesn't know about any of these things that my parents keep saying about him, but he knows they are very religious and kind of toxic sometimes. What should I do? In my opinion, I really do think that you should tell your boyfriend exactly what your family is saying about him. It's better to say it now than 10 years down the line when they're saying this behind his back and he finds out in some roundabout way. That would be absolutely tragic. And I honestly don't blame you for saying, you know what, I love my significant other and I want to marry them just as they are. And I don't care that they are not rich. That, in my opinion, is how any loving marriage should be. You should love the person for who they are and what they bring to the table. And I'm not talking about financially. Your family also seems very toxic. Their attitude towards marriage and how you should just marry somebody who's rich basically is such a terrible precedent to set. I mean, what kind of future does that guarantee for you and your partner? Especially if you don't even know that you love this person. You're only in it for money. How disgusting and shallow can you get? There's obviously cultural differences going on here, and I totally understand that. But I think the original poster has it right. If you don't love your partner, then it's really not going to work out. I would much rather be with somebody who loves me for who they are, but they don't have a lot of money, instead of having someone who does have money and they only turn into some controlling psychopath that I'll never get away from. That sounds like an absolute nightmare. I think if anything, it's time to set some serious boundaries with your family. You need to tell them straight up, no, you cannot talk about my future husband like that. I love him and this is just how it's gonna be. And if you setting boundaries pushes them away, then that's their problem. You do not have to deal with those kind of comments, and you do not need that kind of energy in your life. Today, I messed up by accusing my boyfriend of cheating. So the title is basically self-explanatory. My boyfriend, by the name of James, that's not his real name, is basically the man of my dreams. 8 years ago, I met him and I fell in love. He checked all the boxes boxes of a good, honest man. He took care of his children, who I have also fell in love with. He had his own place, his own car, and everything. 8 years of love, bliss, acceptance, everything. But lately, things started to become weird and I couldn't understand why. He started to become very secretive. He started giving me one-word answers or very short answers overall. He started becoming very protective of his phone, which is very unlike him, as we have an open door policy on phones. He has the code to mine and I have the code to his. And whenever he looked at his phone, he would smile, and when I would ask him what he was looking at, he would say nothing and quickly put his phone down. This all started about a month ago. I told my closest girlfriends and my sister about all of this, and they all came to the conclusion that he was cheating on me. I thought there is no way in the world he could do that, because that's not his character at all. And they suggested I look up signs of cheating. I did, and he checked all of the boxes of cheating. And to say it broke me is an understatement, and they all comforted me. So I stayed the night at my girlfriend's house, and all night James was calling and texting me. I finally texted him back, saying I was spending the night at my girlfriend's house, and that I'll be home in the next day or two, and he said okay. 2 nights later, he texted me if I was coming home today, and I said yes. The girls convinced me to go to the house to confront him, and that they would be there for support. As we drive to the house, I walked into the house with him standing there with a smile on his face, dressed up to the nines, and as he tries to kiss me, I back away, and my friends immediately enter the house and read him the riot act, while I stand there trying not to cry my eyes out. As they continue, he finally yells, "What is going on?" And that's when one of my friends says, "You've been cheating on her." My boyfriend then says, "What? No, I haven't. What's going on?" My girlfriend then says that he needs to prove it. As he tries to talk to me, they push him back and tell him not to go near me, and I then tell them to let him through. And then he asks me if I think that he really has been cheating on me. And after that, I shake my head and I say yes. But he defends himself by saying that he hasn't. So then I ask him, "Well, how do I know that? What's your proof?" He then reminds me that today is September 7th. And at first, today's date didn't mean anything to me. It simply was just another date. But eventually, it dawned on me. September 7th is our 8th anniversary, and my friends and I can't believe it. He then tells me that he's been planning this for a month, and he's sorry for being so secretive, but he wanted it to be a surprise. My girlfriends then ask him about why he's being so secretive on the phone in the first place, and further explains that she thinks that just because it's the anniversary of you guys getting together doesn't absolve him of anything. And that's when he says, "You're right." He then takes my hand and looks me in the eyes and says, "Since the day I met you, I knew I found the one. I've wanted to spend the rest of my life with you, and you are the woman I wanted to have my children." He then gets down on one knee and asks me to marry him right there. At this point, it's silent, and between the tears, I say yes, and we become engaged and share hugs and kisses. He then invites my friends to have dinner with all of us. After dinner, things are much lighter, and we are at least able to talk about what happened and have a good laugh. We all eventually apologize for the way we were acting, and he thankfully forgave us all. I'm now just so excited and happy to be newly engaged. If this isn't a lesson in using your words before jumping to crazy conclusions, then I don't know what is. I mean, seriously, what was the original poster thinking? This could have gone horribly. He very easily could have said, "You know what? I don't want to marry you." And also, how on earth can someone prove that they're not cheating? Like, what kind of evidence did you expect him to bring up? Like, how can you possibly prove that you're not being unfaithful? In the end, though, I guess it kind of worked out, but I really think that the original poster needs to work on themselves if they want this marriage to last, because what they just did could have ended horribly, and they're lucky that they have a boyfriend who actually cares. My girlfriend gets very defensive and takes any casual suggestion as an attack on her intelligence, and I honestly don't know what to do. To preface this, yes, I plan on talking to her about this one-on-one very soon, but I'm not entirely sure how. We've been dating for about 6 months, and my girlfriend has a history of emotional abuse from her brother. He would construe stories to other people to make her seem like an idiot or the one in the wrong, especially as a child. He would blame her for things and include enough truth in his stories just for it to be plausible, and then her parents would believe him. As a result, she is swift to isolate anything anyone says to her and call it out if it appears to her as if someone is subtly lying or trying to gaslight. She quickly becomes defensive, assuming the other person is trying to manipulate and gaslight her. The problem is that this has reared its ugly head in our relationship several times and gets ugly quick. For example, an appliance stopped working in her home. I told her when that happens, I usually check the fuse board. Immediately, she was utterly bewildered that I made such an obvious suggestion. Of course, that was the first thing she checked. For me to even suggest something so simple, I must have been subtly attempting to belittle her intelligence. When I moved to explain and defend defend myself, the problem becomes that I'm prioritizing protecting myself instead of acknowledging how I made her feel. It then became a mental spike trap where if I attempt to move in any direction in the argument, she highlights an entirely unforeseen angle to me, twisting what I'm saying, or highlights an apparent contradiction of what I've said in the discussion or to something in the past. It got to the point where I was mentally paralyzed and shut down, fearing I could not formulate anything to say that would not cause her to flip out at me. I had to respond with concise messages just to escape the argument. The only thing I could take from the argument was that if I make a suggestion that might be obvious or she might have thought about, I should highlight it as such. There have been a few things like this, and I realized today it's making me scared to communicate with her. She's on holiday now. Before she left, she realized she didn't have time to shower before going to her friend's house. So I made the suggestion saying, perhaps you already thought of it, but maybe you could just explain to your friend the situation and shower there. But it wasn't enough. And she commented that she, of course, had already thought about doing that. My only alternative would be to passively acknowledge she had a problem and not give any helpful suggestions for fear of a reaction. This was when it clicked for me. I do not want to end up in a relationship where I am scared to suggest much of anything. I spent time formulating that question to soften it as much as possible, half bracing for a negative reaction in case I wasn't going far enough. I've realized I'm scared to make these innocent, well-intended kind of suggestions. I need her to drop this pretense that I am looking to attack her by trying to be helpful. How do I approach this conversation with her? What should I do? The way your girlfriend is acting is completely inappropriate. You've only been dating her for 6 months and this is how she's treating you? I mean, that just doesn't sound like a healthy relationship. And it doesn't sound like you're doing anything crazy. I would personally be very sympathetic and understanding if she was going through something in her personal life and she just needed to vent. And maybe in that moment of weakness, she doesn't need someone to suggest solutions to her problems. She just needs someone to listen. If that were the case, then I would say, yeah, don't give suggestions, just listen. She doesn't want suggestions at this point. But for this situation, this is literally her freaking out over an appliance or over the fact that she couldn't take a shower before she left. The way she is acting is completely irrational and not something you should deal with in the slightest. And you're right, I wouldn't want to be in a relationship either where I'm too afraid to talk to my partner. There's no way that's gonna slide. And these interactions sound like just a normal human conversation. I'm not getting out of this that the original poster is being overbearing in this situation. He is even trying to soften these questions enough where he's basically walking on eggshells. So in my opinion, the original poster is not the problem, it's the girlfriend. If I were in your shoes, as soon as she comes back, I would say, look, we need to have a talk. And then I would lay out exactly how I feel. If she's more than willing to put you down and speak so terribly to you after making a simple suggestion, such as looking at the fuse box if the appliance isn't working, then by all means she should be ready to have the truth broken to her. That's just my opinion on this matter. You should not have to deal with that and you should not be in this kind of environment. Because in my opinion, at the end of the day, her attitude and the way she gets super defensive over everything is only going to cause a bigger rift between the two of you in this relationship. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, use the playlist at the top of the description. And the next time you live stream, use the cream of the crop music. Search Cream of the Stream on Spotify or whatever platform you use for copyright-free music to use for your next stream.